Right, so this talk is how to backdoor invulnerable code. As Christina mentioned, I'm the Director of Offensive Security at Salesforce. It was nice of them to let me make that title up for myself. Let's get going. I promise that this may be very polarizing. You're either going to think I'm very endearing or you're going to hate me by the end of it. So we'll see how it goes. So I want to take a second and just kind of level set on what offensive security is. And your interaction with me is going to make this go way better. So how many in the room, let's just get actually, before we even go into this stuff, in the room, does anyone have security as their day job? In your title is security, your main purpose is doing security stuff? A few. How about okay, you have lots of responsibilities and security probably kind of is one of them? Awesome, okay. And for maybe the few hands that didn't go up, is anyone security revenge seeking in here where you're just here to some security guy wronged you in the past and you're gonna get even now? Any couple hands? Okay, I'm watching you. Okay, so I assume everyone's familiar with what penetration testing is, or at least heard the term, right? Yeah? Hands? Nods? Good. So what I do is like penetration testing. It includes that, but offensive security is a bit more than that. We're frequently called the red team. That is one of our functions that we have. And the idea is that normal penetration testing, you're trying to find the bugs, right? That's what I normally hear from people, oh yeah, you break in and tell us where the vulnerabilities are so that we can find them before the bad guys do. And that is kind of what we do, but the team I run is a little bit different in that we are really focused on just simulating the actual adversary. So we don't actually have a scope where it says you can only attack these things. We attack whatever. The people, the systems, we break into the buildings, whatever it takes. The scope is open, and that allows us to do something for the organization that hopefully doesn't happen very often, is that you get hacked for real and it's very terrifying. And that terrifying moment is often a change catalyst internally for organizations, right? So if you imagine you're Sony the day before the PlayStation Network breach where everything's on fire, if you guys remember that, any nods, guys remember that? You imagine the security guys internal there are hey guys, we should do something about security, and the people who pay for stuff are eh. But imagine the day after that the front line is Sony hacked. I bet that conversation went a lot differently. They were probably take all of my money. So what we do and the scope that we operate in is to create that event kind of on a regular basis to keep the fear alive. So we're kind of like boogeymen. Good. I normally hate bio slides, so I think that went pretty well. And in case it didn't go well, I made this catch-all slide so that I could have a definition. So red teaming, or in my case, what we do is we're an independent group that serves to challenge the efficacy of the organization and challenge them to improve their efficacy. And the idea here, since we're in the security track, is the efficacy of protecting all the things that you really care about, right? So a bit of a spoiler alert. Some of you are going to be oh, no such thing as invulnerable code. I'm sorry if you came here to learn the secret of invulnerable code. Also, look at this GIF. That robot's really got it made. Nice. Deal with it. So, but there is the idea of you can be secure enough, right? That's what we're talking about here. Getting it secure enough so that you're not getting wrecked from the outside all the time, right? So, what is secure enough? I mean, it's kind of a hard thing to quantify. And it's probably, in this case, or at least let's just assume for the rest of this talk, secure enough is you've got code without a bunch of security bugs. Kind of like this, right? Working as intended. All the features are there, no security bugs, right? This is secure enough. It's actually not really related, but it's a good GIF. So, sorry if that's distracting. But the idea that secure enough is going to be you don't have SQL injection, right? Your product it doesn't light up for the OWASP top 10 of the mistakes that everybody's making, and you've already covered that. If you came here to learn how not to write bugs in your code, this isn't actually going to be that talk. So for the purposes of this, it's not another catch-all slide I made for myself. let's just call it code that enforces expected states, rather than allowing users to do things with your system that you did not account for. So the idea is like, you're not going to allow them to make arbitrary database requests when all you wanted to do was let them log in, right? So you're not going to allow them to bypass logging in, things like that. And we're going to assume that we all have that, and we're going to operate in this perfect world. So I guess now the next question is like, how do you secure code? And that's probably obvious. Just write code that doesn't have bugs in it, right? It's easy. Told you would hate me, right? So yes, you should do that, and we should strive to do that. But there is more, and it's that more that I want to talk about. And I have what I think is a really clever metaphor. So let's imagine that our secure enough, aka invulnerable code, is this nickel. And on one side is all those perfect lines of code you write with no security vulnerabilities, right? There's no flaws in it. No one's going to take advantage of the actual code to abuse the product. Now, let's take a look at the other side of this coin and flip it over. And this side of the coin is going to be every other aspect that goes into writing the code, such as the third-party libraries that you integrate that you didn't write yourself, but they're plugged into your code, they're part of your product now. And how about the code repository that actually stores all of the source code, and the underlying source code that makes up that code repository, as well as the actual server that it's running. Maybe you're hosting it, or maybe it's somewhere else. Also, how about the integration systems that put it together, and they compile all the third-party libraries with all the code that you wrote, and they test it and make sure you have code coverage. Maybe they do some security testing. The code and underlying systems that do that, right? It's a server somewhere. And also, let's include the build pipeline, right? All the stuff that moves it from system to system to get it from point A to point B, and then deploys it into production. However, I mean, that has to happen somehow. And let's not forget all the humans that maintain all of those systems, right? The administrators who have access to your internal servers or external servers that do all of these functions that we just talked about. And then let's not forget the other humans who have access to the computers of the previous humans that manage all your systems, because someone has to do IT support inside the company as well, right? So perhaps I'm going on this list of things, and some of you have realized that there's probably another side of this coin still. And you're like, you just flipped the image. That's bullcrap. And you're right. So it's the side you don't see that is actually really important, because it's the side you can't see. And it's not just because I didn't put it on the slide. I want you to feel a little bit how I feel, right? You guys all know that there's another side of that coin that you couldn't see. But the fact that you don't get to see it should create this kind of like weird sensation inside you where you're like, come on, I know there's something more. That's how I feel when people are like, it's secure. I'm like, I know there's something more. I know there's some other way to break it. I know that it's possible. So, because there's always things we can't account for. It's like this. I don't know if anyone saw that coming, but I didn't. So to further harp along on this same train of thought, I'll give a brief expose of the black swan theory. So this guy, about 10 years ago, his name's Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He wrote a book. He's a behavioral economist, and he kind of talks a little bit psychology, talks about economies, and he has this theory that there's these black swan events, right? And the whole name of black swan came from the fact that in the early, all of history, right? Everyone's hanging out in the UK, and they're saying in poems and things that something super rare, it's a black swan, because everyone here has only ever seen white swans. Until around 1697, a couple Dutch explorers go to Australia, and there's black swans all over the place. They're like, oh, hey. So the idea that up until that moment, everyone thought that it was impossible to have a black swan, and then suddenly oh yeah, there's black swans, right? So that's where the name comes from, but what he was really getting at in this is that there are events, and those events you don't really see coming, but they have a huge impact, not only on fiscal markets, but it applies to security as well. And if you went up to anybody and asked someone about, hey, do you think this is likely to happen? They'd probably say, no, that could never happen. We could never get hacked. We're fine. We're secure. But The second it happens, suddenly everybody thinks like, oh, dang, this is way more likely to happen again because it's just now relevant that it did happen to them. Sorry if that didn't make any sense, but I'll stop ranting. So the best we can do here is to accept that there is no ubiquitous security perfection that we can ever achieve. I told you guys would hate me, and I put all the funny GIFs in so to maybe win your favorite back. But the idea is this is really a downer, right? We can never be good at security, right? I'm sure this guy understands. There's a kid sitting in his chair. But on the bright side, we can think like an adversary, and we can challenge where we set the bar for people, right? We can try and see, and we can try and assume that there's some side of the coin that we don't see, and we can always be wondering what's more, what is out there, what would someone do to actually attack us, and how is that going to go down? So the point of this talk is that I'm going to share some of the tactics, because I do this every day as my day job. And a lot of those things like writing secure code, like the targets that I attack, they've got that. They've got that front side of the coin already, and they don't have a bunch of bugs in the externally facing app. So for me, the new common stuff, the new low-hanging fruit, is all these other things. So I'm going to tell you some stories, and hopefully I won't get fired for sharing this stuff, but we'll see how it goes. So we can't really talk about all this stuff without hitting on the human element probably first. So I'm just going to dive into what is social engineering. Can we get some nods or hands? Familiar with this concept generally, people? Right. Cool. And so probably people are like, that's just a fancy word for lying, right? And you'd be half right. It is a very fancy word, and we like to use it a lot. But it doesn't always just imply lying. I like to think that this definition from the social-engineer.org, they've run a podcast for numerous years, and they wrote a book on social engineering. They like to define it as this: any act that influences a person to take an action that may or may not be in their best interest. So it's a little bit different, right? Like a con man is normally tricking you into doing something that's definitely not in your best interest. It's in his. But social engineering is something that we can use to influence our companies to take actions that actually might be in their best interest. Maybe it's what I'm doing up here and trying to influence all of you to take actions that might be in your best interest. So let's not equate social engineering with just lying, because I'm not lying to you today. And you're like, you're right, you liar. So there's a couple key concepts that I just want to lay some ground level stuff with in case we're not super up on the social engineering game. And that's typically when you're going to do some social engineering attempt, the thing that the juicy stuff that you're going to want to leverage is emotional response. And you can get that through posing as an authority figure. So people are like, dang, you have some they're afraid. You have some power over them. But it doesn't have to be that. That's the most common that you see and you're probably familiar with. But it could also be pity. It could be sympathy. It could be empathy, where you make someone feel bad for you, so they want to help. They want to help you, and you suddenly have gotten what you wanted, but the person is happy for what they've done. I won't harp on that too much. The other concept that I'm probably going to say a bunch is pretext. So if I'm using pretext and that's a word everyone should understand, then I'm assuming that, and it's not the case. Pretext is the story, the characters, all the facts and info that you are fabricating, or at least training yourself to be in the moment, right? It's like method acting. This is your character. This is the scene. This is the reality that you are going to impose to be an effective social engineer. So pretext is the story. And, excuse me. One quick note on manipulation versus elicitation. So there's normally one of these two goals with social engineering. You either want to get info from someone, which can seem pretty benign, right? I call you up and I ask you, what kind of printers do you have? I'm with this sales company, and you tell me the printers, and then I find a vulnerability in the printers, right? You haven't done anything. I haven't caused you to take any action. All you did was tell me something, and I got information. And so that's just elicitation, getting info. Manipulation is, I want you to do something. Normally, in my case, I want you to double-click on something and run it on your computer so that I get access to your computer. For most of this stuff, we're talking about the manipulation side, so that someone can actually get in your company and not just get the info. So most of the time, when you say social engineering, people think phishing, right? Someone has sent a bunch of emails to the company. Does anyone's company do phishing testing, where you have like a bunch of emails that get sent to everybody and you see who clicks through? Cool. So that level of phishing is like the classic kind, right? So that is a form of social engineering. That is not the only form. So the classic thing that most of your companies do is you send a link to a bunch of people, and it asks them to log into something as part of some process so they can win some prize or view some document or do something like that, and you want to see if you can capture their credentials. Now, that doesn't give you access to their system. It might help you later on, but that's not the end. So another example is the Nigerian prince with a diamond mine, the classic 419 scam. Does anyone got that email before, where some dude is some dude's really, really rich, but he just needs like $1,000 from you, and he's going to give you like 10%, so you're going to make like 10% of your money, like 20% of your money. This is just basically like they want money, right? And the new evolved form of this that you see is the IRS call, where someone calls you and they're like, we're from the IRS, and if you don't give us money that you owe in back taxes, we are going to come arrest you, or something like that. And so I got that call I get that call pretty frequently. Maybe I do owe some taxes, but I get that call, and I'm like, this is fun. I'm going to mess with this guy. I'm pretty sure the IRS is not calling me. If you ever get this call, the IRS is not. They don't do that. They don't call people. So I'm starting to just like mess with him, and I'm like, yeah, I want to send you the money, and I just keep giving him the wrong number, and he's getting really frustrated. Then he starts threatening to like drone strike my house. He's like, the SWAT's outside. They have your place surrounded. We're going to nuke your house. I'm like, geez, man. So anyways, highly recommend that. But the point that I'm getting at, this type of phishing, this is weak. It's like weak sauce, totally lame. This stuff is still pretty effective, but it's not effective enough. The reason being is it's impersonal, right? And the fact that you have these impersonal things that you sort of need to spread it over a big blanket to get the results you want, right? Send out 40 emails, get 3 people following through, hopefully. But there's another type of phishing that we can use. There's another type of social engineering that's way more personal, and it's way more targeted. Yeah. All right. Let that sink in. That's a good one. See, we got a theme, phishing and sharks. I put a lot of thought into this. So this type of phishing is more effort per person, right? So it's a lot harder for the social engineer to conduct, but it's a lot less likely to be detected because you are hoping that you can use a very good pretext and get one person one time and boom, it's over. And if you spread that attack out over too many people, the chances of someone reporting it to your security team or noticing or sounding the alarm and saying like, hey, watch out, this is happening, goes up. And for me, who wants to get into the company without being detected, because if I get detected, I get kicked out, I have to start over, and I've wasted a lot of my time, this is much, much better. So I'm going to share an example, a real story, from one of our internal tests that we did. Basically, we are sitting there as the red team, and we are having a bit of trouble getting inside this company. So we are turning to social engineering as our fail-through. And we see a vibe manager. Do you guys have vibe managers at your companies? I don't know what that is, but this person's like, I'm a vibe manager. Also, check this out. I am volunteering for this Surf for Life program. And I just got funded, and everything's awesome. I'm going to go to Costa Rica. I'm going to surf, and it's for volunteering. I'm like, little light bulb going off at this point. So what we do is we go register this domain. Anyone want to point out what's wrong with it? Yeah. This isn't Surf for Life. This is Surf or Life. It's a little bit different. Also a lot scarier now, right? It's high stakes. But we register this domain, and we then, here, I'll just read you this email, right? We send this email. We say, hi, person. First of all, we'd like to congratulate you on your successful fundraising project, whatever it was called. Your project's great. We really appreciate it. Thank you. The date for your September trip, which we know because it was also talked about the date on Twitter. But this seems like we're the right people because we know about the trip, right? It's just around the corner, and we need additional info from you. Can you download this form located here and fill it out so that we can get all your travel stuff booked and take care of everything for the trip. And you can see it's our Surf for Life domain that we control. Like, have a nice day. By the way, what's at this link is a jar file. It's a Java executable, if you're not familiar. When you download it, it's like, hey, it's not good. But most people will click run because you got to submit the info. And we're like, this is the secure companion app that you must use to submit the info. And you want to go to Costa Rica, right? Within 2 hours, we get this email back. Like, hey, Mylan, some name we made up. I'll fill this out ASAP. I finally purchased my plane ticket. I need to get stuff reimbursed. Also, this app doesn't actually work. It just throws an error. So then later, we're like, oh, don't worry. You can just submit it over email and please give us all your information. We had to do that to maintain, we don't want her to get suspicious, so we have to keep that going on while we have a shell on her computer. So, of course, there's no form. There is no spoon. And we get a shell. So I just want to really quickly, if you're unfamiliar with this concept, we live, eat, sleep, breathe shells all day, but the idea is that I have access to your computer. I have this, I have a terminal. So your computer is somewhere in your company, and I can type anything I want on it and do anything I want on it. Make noises like that. So here's how we start doing this. Here's how we take a look at the company externally. This is our general process for social recon. And for this example, I am going to pretend that Rick and Morty, perhaps season 3, so I'm a huge Rick and Morty fan, and season 3, I don't know if anyone else out there, I see some nods. Let's pretend that getting the storyboards or something for season 3 is our target. So if we were to start this, it's simple. We say who has access to it for real, right? You don't just start hacking on the internet looking for Rick and Morty. You look for the people. Who will have access? The easiest way to do it, search LinkedIn. I don't want job offers. I want people that said they work on this type of thing. So I found this guy. He's cool. I started looking at his LinkedIn page, and this is all public information. I'm just showing you Google results. This isn't some scary tool. This is LinkedIn, so no one panic. So you're hey, he's a props designer. That might be useful. Perhaps if I get access to his computer, I might be able to get access to servers that store Rick and Morty stuff, or be able to get further leads to inform how I'm going to proceed. And with all this information, we normally do this for 30 or 40 people at the target to try and build an understanding of what do people do, what are their functions, what do they have access to, how are they connected, what do they care about. So we just build dossiers on them, put a picture, and then look for all their different social online presences. This guy's got a website, he's got Twitter, we take down little notes about it, we take screenshots of everything, we upload them into Google Drive because Google Drive will OCR all the images. And then you can search later for just strings of text, and it will pull up the screenshots that you made before. It's kind of efficient. Probably could be automated more. Look on Facebook. This guy's sharing his AOL Instant Messenger name there, because that's a thing still. Look at Google+, because that's a thing that people use all the time. I'm going to come back to this, right? This seems really innocuous, who cares about your Google+ profile? You'll see in a second. So what we're building is this, right? A little document of all the publicly available information so that we can kind of encapsulate this person and their identity and become familiar with them. And you keep doing that until you have a good enough picture to try and engineer some type of situation where you would be getting access to their computers. So, yeah, sorry, a little bit of bad news. Attackers can stalk you using the internet, get access to the things that you have access to. This isn't a super new concept. It's probably not talked about openly like this because it's terrifying for people. And normally when people say they do this, there's a line of privacy advocates that are waiting to yell at me. No? Safe? Okay. Also, it does get worse than this. So Google+, you can do something a little nifty and clone people's profiles, right? All these links on this web page, they're links, they're images. So I can download those images and I can make my own Google+ profile. So here's the original one, and here's mine that I made with a new email. It's pretty similar to the original one. And you're like, well, what are you going to do with Google+ profile? But actually what happens is cloning someone's profile like this, I wrote this because I was trying to come up with an idea of what this is called, and I couldn't find anything. So I wrote this in a drunken fury. And cloning public profiles allows a social engineer to leverage a target's subliminal familiarity with identity-based content to gain instant rapport. I couldn't figure out what Like, you know when you see someone's profile and you see the profile photo and a lot of things are simplified and the user interface is nice, you're not seeing the email that they use to register, you're seeing some online identity. And because people get used to seeing that, if I can clone that and use it, I will gain instant trust with you, just a little bit. Maybe perhaps enough, perhaps not, but nothing will kind of like spark and seem weird because everything looks like it normally does. So here's what I mean. If I send an email from this new account that I just cloned, and I tie this Google Plus profile to it, because I've populated Google Plus, when I send an email to you, it bolds my name, it puts a picture there, the email's still there. That's my email I made up, not the real email for him. But on the side, boom, big bold letters. Like that's the name, it's the same profile photo again, public posts that I copied are there, and all this content sort of makes you feel a little bit at ease. And in this, perhaps I'm sending some kind of file. So you're like, how are you going to use this? Gmail must be doing something to protect us a bit, and Gmail is doing a lot of stuff. They are blocking all of these file types. And if you have your own Google org, you can add additional file types. You should note that jar is not in this list. And it is a really nice, malicious way to deliver stuff because it's not in this list. But if you have your own Google org, you can add it, and then jar will be blocked too. Also, if you zip things, it decompresses them and looks for the files inside. So that's not a way to get around it. Pretty good that they do this. We shouldn't be emailing EXEs around. However, you can share any file type you want through Google Drive. So if you upload something and share it directly to the person, they get something that like this. Like, hey, look, demo.exe, here you go, please download. So a real example of this looks like this. We are pretending to be this guy, we've profiled him, and we are thinking like, okay, I know he works with this other person. He's a bit higher in the org chart based on what we're seeing online publicly, but he still works with this other person. So they're not super close together, but the person will probably respond to him because he's a little bit like, he's seniority. He's like a founder of the company. And all I always said is, can you try and back up with this? I keep getting an error. And it's a jar file, we're sharing it out directly. They're going to receive something like this. Hey, can you check this real quick, see if it'll open backuprelationships.jar. When they click it, they get a prompt to download it. There's no preview available for jar files. They'll download it. There will be a warning, right? Chrome will say, hey, you probably shouldn't run this. It could be malicious. But your friend at work sent it to you, so it's probably okay, right? He's having an error. There's no way you can respond to this request without opening it, right? So this is what the person sends back. Hey, it doesn't open for me. It says I need to install JDK. So this would have been a shell, but they didn't have Java installed. So of course, my next step is like, okay, here's how you install the JDK, please. Like, but yeah, so sometimes it doesn't work. So what if something simple like that doesn't work? The good news is it continues to get worse. In this other example, I think this is actually against the same target. We're running a lot of campaigns at once trying to get in because we're failing so hard in some of them, right? We're sending jars and they're sending back screenshots of them not having Java installed. So we're upping the game a bit. In this scenario, I have decided that I am a journalist who freelances for this magazine that covers interior design things. And I found a real company out there and I'm just pretending that I work for them. And I email their PR portal saying like, hey, we'd like to do this. We have interviewed all these other companies. We've interviewed Twitter and we've interviewed Facebook. We saw your social media presence and we saw pictures of your office and we think that your interior design would be great to feature in this article alongside these other really great companies. And for them, they're like, great. So I'm trying to set up an interview where we can go there in person. Our request actually gets picked up by a third-party PR firm that handles this for them, and they end up getting this email, which is like, hi, Katie, by the way, I'm connecting you with Anthony Taylor. That's my fake name at Life Edited, a real company that I just decided to pretend I work at, to help set up an interview with a tour at our target. As we discussed, Life Edited will be featuring office spaces that have interesting interior design and culture that foster creativity. They'll be featuring the office spaces of big companies like Facebook and Twitter, and would also like to feature us. It's basically perfect. This is exactly the way I engineered it so that I wanted them to feel like this. So they're really excited to set up something, and because this person is sending it, that's normal, right? They trust them already. So it's not even like a random third person, it's the PR firm, which they're used to. perhaps the PR firm should have vetted us more, but I don't know. So they're totally stoked to set up the interview. Basically, they're like, yo, let's set it up on this date. Let's do it. So what happens is I go and I interview and tour in this office with a colleague of mine, and we take pictures of everything, right? We're taking photos, but really we're taking photos of like, where are the doors and what security systems do they have? Are there Post-it notes on people's computers? What's written on whiteboards? Is that interesting? Like, where's the Wi-Fi password? Things like that. And this guy actually had never used like a camera before in his life, so most of the pictures just like blurry swaths of stuff. But he made it seem like he was doing it, so that was the important part. And meanwhile, I'm interviewing this guy, and I'm asking questions like, oh, great, and we're talking about interior design, but I'm like, oh, how late do people stay in the office, right? Because I want to know when I can come back. I don't want to wait till 4 in the morning and get busted by the cops. I want to, like 7 or 8 o'clock would probably be pretty good. And he's like, oh yeah, people stay pretty late. I'm like, oh well, but good to know. So there is one other side effect to this. This rapport and trust we built over time allows us to spring a trap. So we've been talking for hours, and I look at him and I say, hey, I can't believe I've been so forgetful. I need you to sign a photo release form, and we've been taking pictures all day, and I didn't do this. So like my ass is on the line here if we don't sign it. And he says, oh yeah, sure, just, I'm like, can you print it for me? He says, yeah, sure, just email it to me. And I'm like, actually, I have it on this flash drive here. I just didn't print it out. And he's like, yeah, sure, and it's regular flash drive, doesn't do anything malicious. I don't know what kind of computers he's gonna have. It's not gonna blow up or anything. But he puts it in his computer, and it pops up, and there's a mess of folders in it. And he has it, he controls it. I'm not like pushing my way into anything. And I'm like, oh, can you try, like, is it in this folder? Oh, actually, maybe it's in this other folder. Actually, do you mind? Could I just look for it? I'm sorry, it's such a mess. He's like, yeah, sure. So now the CFO of the company is allowing me to use his computer with my flash drive plugged into it. And of course, I know where the file is. Click, 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 down through the right folder path. Double click my malware. Double click the PDF, which looks like this. He prints the PDF for me. That gives me a shell on his system because I was able to just double-click malware on his computer. And then, just to prove that this worked and also get more access, he says like, oh, I need to go to a meeting, and allows us to sit there. And like, hey, can we just hang out here? And he's like, of course. You know, we open office plan. We trust you. We've been talking to you for hours. Of course you can hang out in the office. So there's this thing, and there's my computer with a shell on it. And then I go to a developer, and I'm like, hey, actually, I didn't realize I need another one. Can you print this for me and do the same exact thing? And it works as well. So we get more shells. Normally in like security presentations, this is when everyone's like, yeah, and claps. You don't have to. Thank you. Stop, guys. Jeez. So at this point, you're probably sufficiently like feeling like, okay, it's possible to get into our stuff and the world is on fire, but we can go further, right? So what happens after you get access, right? You just have access to the computer, you have the terminal that you can type into, but you don't have their password, you don't have anything, and you're probably gonna need that password. So can we get a volunteer, like what is the easiest way, you can just shout it out, to get someone's password? Ask for it, right. We just ask for the password. So here's how you ask for someone's password. OS X has a built-in thing here. I'll just demo this, look. So OsaScript is basically a scripting engine that can automate UI functions. And what this script does is says, hey, tell the system event app to display a dialog box that looks like this, and also use the icon from Software Updater. And if you run this, what happens is, boom, this pops up. I don't know about you, but if my computer wants to do something and it needs my password to apply updates, like, I probably want to do it. Another thing is, because I've not added the cancel button here, pressing escape does nothing. So you can't, there's no close on it either. So the best you can do is hit enter, which would make it go away for a second. But as you can see, the text returned here is like not the password, no text. So I can just do this and pop it up until you get annoyed enough to actually type your password in. Now you have your password here, directly in the command line. This is another plausible moment while we get the presentation going again. So yeah, so perhaps you're like, no problem, we're on Windows. Well, here's the same thing for Windows. And this requires PowerShell. So if you're a good security conscious Windows environment, you know that PowerShell is like super, super, super dangerous. It's like the hackers, as much as use that it gives your admins and people who do DevOps in your environment and stuff like that, it's way more useful for the evil guys. It is super, super dangerous. But you can use it to do the same thing. That looks pretty legitimate. If perhaps PowerShell is disabled, in one instance, PowerShell was disabled. It was blocked by bit 9. But Java was allowed. So we wrote a full screen overlay that's written in Java that looks like the login screen. You just pop that program up and boom, like login screen. Person's like, that's weird. I don't know what you do at a login screen, but I normally type my password in to unlock the computer, and that's what ended up happening. Also, Linux. This is one line, GK sudo. Basically, you're prompting for keychain access, and you can make the message anything you want. Apply your password to, enter your password to apply changes, something like that. Also, this has a super annoying effect of dimming the rest of the screen when this pops up. So I guess the point is we're pretty good at stealing passwords, and this isn't even the tip of the iceberg of the techniques we have, right? We can keylog. If this stuff doesn't work, there's a lot of other ways to get people's passwords. So what's our defense against that, right? I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. We have 2FA. 2FA is really good, right? If you add 2FA on access to your systems and your servers that are important, if you add 2FA and access to your GitHub repo, your single sign-on portals, that is going to add a nightmarish step for the attackers and is going to make them have to up their game big time. 2FA is a huge, huge pain. So it makes it way harder, but it's not perfect. And here's some of the most common pitfalls that I find when people are implementing 2FA. Are we good on time? Cool. So when we encounter 2FA, if it's on a single sign-on portal of some sort, right? It's on some web-based authentication thing. The user gets prompted for 2FA, and then they get a session set up. We can typically steal the cookies on the system, put them in our own system, and then suddenly we have that session. We have that same access. So having fairly short-lived sessions and also doing some type of geo-IP blocking so that someone can't continue using a session that started somewhere suddenly in China, something like that, would be bad. But on the flip side of that, if you have access to someone's machine, you can proxy all your traffic through it. So that won't work either. The best case scenario in terms of like browser choice and where this stuff is living is Chrome on OS X. So Chrome on OS X, in order to actually do this attack, you need to be able to have the person's password, take the keychain file off, use their password to unlock their keychain, get an encryption key out of the keychain, use that encryption key in a script to decrypt the cookies so that you can replay them. That's where it's the best. If it's Firefox on a Linux box or even on an OS X box, it's like you just take the files that are on the system and put them on another system, and it's done. Like you have all the sessions. So I wish I had better advice for this one. So yeah, I guess just be aware that this other side of the coin is there. So you can raise the bar, but we can't always fix for everything. Yeah, so this is what SSH multi. Any DevOps people in the room? Less than I thought. So SSH multiplexing is like, I've seen this almost ubiquitously across targets, right? They put 2FA on a Bastion server. They have a really good model. They're like, anyone who wants to get access to our production environment is going to have to SSH into the Bastion, and it has 2FA on it. And that is like where the security harness is. And then once they're in, they can kind of do whatever they want, or maybe there's some additional layers. But for the most part, we are going to secure something with 2FA on SSH. So we can't have people logging into the systems all willy-nilly, right? But they also say, because this is inconvenient, you can enable this server-side setting called SSH multiplexing. And what that does is allows you to, if you have a session established, open a new one with no prompt for credentials, no authentication. So if you're the bad guy and I'm on your machine and you have SSH'd into super secret production, super secure server, and you have this setting on, all I do is look in your process listing, see that you're SSH somewhere, copy that, paste it, and I'm SSH'd in there now too because this setting is involved. So yes, it's nice that we can SCP files without having to enter our 2FA token every time, but this has been like an Achilles heel for company after company. So maybe look into your own companies, right? So, yeah, so I don't want to give away too many spoilers, because we're teaching a workshop tomorrow on Jenkins, and if there's an overlap here, I don't want people to know all the answers to everything. But continuous integration systems have been the bane of existence. Basically, in every one of our tests where we have bumped up to some continuous integration system, I see Jenkins the most frequently, but I've seen a number of other ones. It is basically like remote command execution in a box. And what I mean by that is you can get a shell on it basically every time, because it does things like log into servers and run commands on them. And in Jenkins, there's like a console that if you type stuff into, it just executes whatever you want. So it's super, super dangerous, and it's super plagued with bugs, because when people write products like this, especially Jenkins, it has like a new like authentication bypass or remote code execution outside, like a bug that has remote code execution, not the features that allow people to do that. Basically like once per quarter. If you look back at the vulnerabilities that have come out, it's pretty consistent around 4 a year. So if you have these systems in your environment, like the least you could do is patch and put authentication on it, right? So also, that's a good GIF, right? That's a good one. Okay, so let's get to the point, right? Backdooring code. At this point, we sort of understand that attackers from the outside can understand your company and understand the people and understand who's going to have access to what internally. Also, we have a lot of ways where we can get their passwords. Once we have their passwords, we have a fair number of ways that we can bypass 2FA. And once we have bypassed 2FA, you can use that to log into internal portals and read all the documents to understand further how the internal systems work. You also have access to the servers. You probably have access to the code pipeline. So the question is, like, is backdooring your production code really that hard? Even if you've written all the code correctly, even if there's no bugs, is introducing a bug or a backdoor or changing how it functions or stealing your signing cert to get into the App Store really that hard? I think no, even when you have this. So just in case anyone had like OCD and needed to see the other side of that coin, the thing I want you all to think of is just because I showed you these things doesn't mean this is everything. This is just a little small sample of things that I've seen that are really common. Hopefully that you can take them back to your organization and be like, hey, are we making these super common mistakes that everyone else is making? Maybe raise the bar a little bit, but you can't stop there, right? You have to keep challenging it to keep raising the bar, because the guys that want to steal all your stuff and wreck your companies are going to keep doing that, right? So they're not going to quit. This is the end of the talk. We'll watch this GIF. So questions, complaints, heckling?
So you're a small shop, maybe you're relatively new, and you can't afford to have somebody on staff doing this all the time. What do you do?
So
how do you cope?
Do you have, how small?
Well, we're a bit bigger now, but technical staff's probably about 15, 20 max.
Do you have compliance obligations? Do you have any type of external service? So this is the stuff we do. There's a bunch of people. Like Christina, for instance, works at a third-party consulting company. I won't plug them by name because that feels skeezy, but the idea is that you can hire this, right? And a lot of times you have to, for compliance sakes, you have to get a pen test. You can a lot of times double dip on that budget, because most hackers that are out there working at those companies would love for you to open up the scope and say, give us a test like this. And you can let them do the compliance stuff, and you can kind of bake it into the same thing and sell it internally, and you can allow those third-party people to do this, right? You have to understand that it's scary. Not everyone in the company is going to like this, but if you care about it, like I understand having a team, an internal team that does nothing but this is a crown jewel security luxury item that is kind of crazy, and it's not very common. But if you relax the scope and you say, we want to test like this, also like certify us for compliance, the third-party consulting companies will not only thank you, but they will do a lot more. And you can then leverage this to make like a story of, here's what's going to happen. Here's how we can get hacked. And that's.
So just follow on from that. So I'm the CTO, and I'm pretty keen on doing all of this. And we've gone through a couple of pen tests, and frankly, I think they've been pretty indifferent. I don't think they've got the kind of talent to do what you're doing, frankly. So I guess the next question is, where do you find the good people?
So there's a couple companies that are more or less known for this. This is kind of the difference between pen testing and red teaming. And if you lead with, look, we're going to do you guys a really nice, solid, and open this up, and we want red team. Like, see if they say red teaming. It's starting to become too popular already, which is like driving me nuts. But see if they list red teaming as like their core service offering. I'll talk to you offline. I don't want to like pitch vendors up here,
Sure.
but yeah.
Thanks.
Everyone's sufficiently terrified. Okay, thanks.